My name is Grace. I'm a housewife. I married my husband, Matthew, after a workplace romance. Our married life is smooth, without any complaints, and we live happily together every day. I've heard that many people struggle with their spouse's relatives after marriage, especially when it comes to a sister-in-law. I've heard that it can be quite troublesome. However, Olivia, my husband's older sister, and I get along very well. We used to go shopping and travel together frequently. I also have a sister of my own, but we don't get along with each other. I often thought that if Olivia were my real sister, it would be great. However, one year, Olivia fell ill and passed away. The day I received the news, I was so sad that I couldn't eat. I couldn't stop crying until the day of the funeral. And on the day of the funeral, my husband, who had gone to the funeral venue ahead of me, suddenly called. "What's wrong?" When I picked up the phone,
"Absolutely do not come to the funeral venue. Run to your parents' house. I'll explain the situation later, but for now just leave the house quickly."
He spoke in a breathless and angry tone, almost like he was in a rage. I didn't know what was going on. Why can't I go to the funeral of my sister-in-law with whom I was very close? I arrived at my parents' house with an unsettled feeling.
"What's wrong? Today was supposed to be Olivia's funeral."
My parents were surprised by my sudden gloomy expression when I returned home. I confessed what my husband had told me.
"Huh, is that so? Just now someone claiming to be Matthew's relative contacted us. They were complaining about you, calling you all sorts of names. They even threatened to set our house on fire if we didn't pay them compensation. We have no idea what this is all about. We thought it might be a scam or harassment, but there might be something to it. Anyway, let's wait for further communication from Matthew."
While saying this, my husband, dressed in mourning attire, hurriedly drove to our house. My husband bowed deeply, lowering his head.
"My relatives did something unforgivable earlier. It seems they haven't arrived here yet. Just to be safe, let's go to the police."
I couldn't immediately grasp the story from my breathless husband. I decided to calm him down and listen to the details.
"In my sister's suicide note, there were a lot of accusations against you."
No way.
"It's true. Things like being called disgusting by you or being accused of violence. Baseless claims were written there and made-up stories asking for revenge, and the relatives who took it seriously are saying they'll seek revenge against you and are trying to demand an exorbitant compensation. This place is also compromised, so it's dangerous. Let's go to the police immediately."
He confessed this with a pale face. I was in shock and collapsed at the entrance. With my mother's support, I managed to regain some composure. My sister-in-law talking about me? There's no way that could be true. Even when I desperately searched my memory for any clues, I couldn't recall a single fragment of having done such a thing. My husband comforted me, stroking my shoulder.
"Calm down. You'll be okay. It might be a fabrication. Maybe it was rewritten by my mother who dislikes you. My sister always spoke of you as if you were her real sister, saying how adorable you were. She used to talk about you with such happiness. It's unbelievable."
He comforted me like this. However, I began to question whether things like fabricating or altering a suicide note could be so easily done. Even with my limited knowledge of the law, I quickly understood that tampering with such written documents would result in immediate legal consequences.
"Anyway, if there was a phone call, relatives might come here."
Feeling pressured, I left my parents' house. When I arrived at the police station, they immediately wanted to hear the details. I submitted the recorded abusive phone calls on my family home, and the smartphone video that captured my mother-in-law suddenly reading an unnatural suicide note at the funeral, as well as the furious reactions of relatives. The police informed me that since there hadn't been any actual harm yet, they would enhance patrols in the neighborhood and wait for developments. Still, the fact that we had consulted in advance, knowing it could work in our favor if something were to happen in the future, gave me some reassurance. However, shortly after returning home to my family's house, something happened that shattered that feeling of security. When my husband parked the car and got out, there was a commotion at the front door. I approached it cautiously, wondering what could be the matter. Here I found my sister. Her cheek reddened from being hit. It's all your fault. There were the angry shouts of unfamiliar middle-aged men and women. On the ground, my father's beloved golf club lay broken, and fragments of vases and ornaments were scattered around. It was likely that while we were discussing the matter with the police, my husband's relatives had unexpectedly stormed my family's house.
Hey everyone, my wife really hasn't done anything. And hurting my wife's sister? I'm calling the police.
In a fit of anger, my husband called the police. At his words, it was evident that the individuals who seemed to be uncles and aunts momentarily hesitated. Oh, sister? The two of them standing next to my husband finally seemed to realize that I, Grace herself, was there. It appeared they had come to the realization that it was my sister they had harmed. They seemed to have finally recognized their mistake.
She's a vindictive woman, just as the suicide note suggests, preparing a doppelganger. How could you bully Olivia, whom we've cherished since childhood?
It's because of you that she suffered mentally and her illness progressed. And they continued to blame me, trying to approach me once again with a golf club in hand. However, realizing the seriousness of the violence towards my sister and the sound of things being destroyed at the front door, my father rushed in and grabbed his uncle's hand, shouting at him.
Not content with just making rude phone calls, how dare you raise your hand to my eldest daughter?
I had never seen such a frightening look from my normally gentle father. I couldn't help but shudder at the sight of him. My aunt and uncle were not convinced, and my father and them had a long struggle. Eventually, the police arrived. They put me in a police car for questioning.
Grace, are you okay?
I was in a state of shock due to everything that had happened, but my father's words snapped me back to reality. Sis, I'm sorry, it's my fault. I rushed to my injured sister to apologize. My father, too, lost all the momentum he had earlier.
I'm sorry I couldn't protect you, even before you got married,
he said, feeling downcast, as my mother brought him an ice pack. He was trying to cool my sister's cheek down. My sister took it from him and applied it herself. Huh? It's not your fault, you know. You might be playing in quiet, but you got along just fine with our late sister, who was so serious. This is assault, isn't it? And we can get money from those uncles earlier. It's a win. Elizabeth is saying this. My sister always has this kind of nonchalant attitude, even in situations like this. She should be upset and angry about being attacked for something she didn't do, but this time I feel like she's pretending to be calm to protect me, and I appreciate that. And watching how she was after I got married, I truly appreciated that she believed me when I was falsely accused. That's why I couldn't forgive my husband's uncle and aunt for causing pain to such a sister of mine and for their violent actions. That night my husband said to me,
I'll gather evidence. You stay here. If anything happens, please let me know.
He said this, leaving me behind and heading to his own family's house. I felt anxious while my husband was away, but it seems that news of the unjust violence by his uncle and aunt spread among the relatives. After that, no more relatives came to my family's house. In the following days, we arranged a meeting. My parents, sister, husband, and in-laws, and several relatives, including my uncle and aunt, gathered at my husband's family home. It was a slightly spacious house. My uncle and aunt seemed to have a somewhat better understanding of the situation, but they still seemed to believe that they were in the right.
If you admit to the bullying mentioned in the suicide note, we'll forgive you from now on.
So please don't file a damage report either. They demanded an apology with outrageous reasoning like this and asked us to refrain from filing a complaint. At that moment, $20,000. My previously silent sister spoke up with those words first. What? What did you say? My uncle glared at her with a puzzled expression. If you give me $20,000, I'll hold off on filing a complaint. The place where I was hit hurts and I can't concentrate on my work. Plus, you need to compensate for the golf club and ornaments you broke. Hand over $20,000. My sister casually uttered those words while using her smartphone. My uncle's face turned bright red.
What did you say? Is there such a ridiculous story just because she slapped someone once? How audacious. If a sister is a sister, then an older sister is an older sister.
They berated in such a manner. To top it off, they turned to my parents and said,
Raising such shameless sisters.
Don't you feel ashamed as parents? They vented their frustration. My mother was calm, but firm. With all due respect, both sisters are adults. They should be expressing their opinions as individuals, not as children. Isn't it natural to respond to a rude person with rudeness? I cannot fully comprehend the fear and pain you felt when you were suddenly struck by them. I can't understand that anger since I've never experienced it. She replied quietly. Honestly, isn't the will more problematic than me? My sister spoke again, seeming to have no interest in her own situation. She yawned and casually asked, perhaps because the will, which could have been tampered with, had caused my husband's relatives to act outrageously.
About that, it was indeed done by you, Mom, right?
My husband turned to his own mother and questioned her. My nervous-looking mother-in-law, who had been restless for a while, flinched. I'm losing memory. My recollections are so unclear. She tried to excuse herself with a somewhat placating tone. Ignoring that, my husband unfolded a piece of paper.
This is my sister's real will. The location where my mother hid it was written in my mother's diary, and I searched and found it. Someone fabricated a will full of lies, making it sound real and fooled our relatives. Who's the fool here?
My husband suppressed his anger and spoke in a voice filled with disappointment.
My mother, in her diary, she wrote cruel things like, it would be better if my son's wife had replaced his sister. She wrote cruel things without any hesitation. I can't consider her my mother anymore.
My husband stared at his biological mother with a cold gaze. My mother-in-law's words gradually faded in front of that gaze, and in the end she was sobbing. My father-in-law, who had been quietly listening to the situation, spoke up.
It's my responsibility for not seeing what kind of person she really was. Son, you don't need to have anything to do with this house and our relatives ever again. Live happily, far away. From now on, I will monitor her and ensure that you don't have to see her. It's the least I can do to make amends. My husband nodded in response to these words, and then turned to the silent uncle and aunt. Please, go ahead and pay the $20,000 that were offered earlier. Otherwise, I will indeed file a police report with all the evidence we have. I would prefer that, but it seems to be your preference. My aunt and uncle shook their shoulders and glared at my sister. $20,000 to such an ill-mannered girl. Yay! I can buy bags from Louis Vuitton and Callaway golf clubs. Lucky! My sister had a triumphant expression, grinning broadly. Although I disliked some aspects of my sister's personality, this time I felt that her happiness wasn't just innocent joy. Our father's cherished golf club had been broken, our mother's carefully arranged vase was shattered, and I had been unjustly dragged into this absurd trouble. As a family of three, we were left stunned, and it seemed like she intentionally used rude language without any concern for our feelings. Despite the scene, my mother-in-law clung to my husband's legs, crying. You're all I have left. Only you, my beloved son. However, my husband's heart remained firmly closed. So does my sister not matter at all to you? The will was switched, wasn't it? That's right, isn't it? No. Listen to your mother. Can we please stop this already? How much more of an ugly person can you be? My father-in-law, still trying to assert his point, delivered a stern reprimand to my mother-in-law. I can't stand this anymore. Let's all go. Okay, let's leave the discussion about money for another day. Goodbye. My sister rose swiftly, seemingly scornful of our mother-in-law, and walked past the confused relatives who had discovered my mother-in-law's lies. With a confident stride, she headed for the front door. My parents followed her, and my husband, taking my bewildered hand, led me out of the house. At that moment, my husband said, Even though she's like that now, she used to be a normal mother back in the day. When we came home from school, she used to give snacks to me and my sister. I won't return to this house anymore, so I feel a bit lonely."
I still remember him smiling a complicated smile. A week later, as my emotions gradually settled, I decided to ask my husband about the real will.
"Actually, I had planned to wait until you could smile more freely."
Matthew brought out the real document and spread it out. "I love Grace," it began. "I have gone through a tough battle with illness, with frequent hospitalizations. Unlike my mother's feelings for my younger brother, I felt that my mother's concern for me was thinner. My father's kindness was always evident, but Grace, a woman close to my age, was the one who understood me the most. Because Grace has become my emotional support, I can feel every day that I can keep on living, even when it's tough. My parents have significant assets, so I want all my inheritance to go to Grace and Matthew. My mother would likely spend it all quickly, but my father would likely understand. I hope this can be the foundation of your happiness." I couldn't help but hold that will close and cry.
"Just let it all out today."
My husband comforted me by putting his arm around my shoulders. From that day on, I decided to cherish the memory of my sister-in-law and live with a smile. I'll keep her legacy safely stored away until the day I can use it. Afterward, my sister settled with my husband's uncle and aunt for $20,000. She promptly sent them a photo list of what she had bought as compensation, along with a letter of thanks for the $20,000. It was truly her way of handling things, but perhaps it was not enough to alleviate the pain of the real beating she had endured. On a side note, through this experience, my relationship with my sister improved slightly, and she started inviting me to have meals together more often. As for our in-laws, my mother-in-law suffered a mental breakdown and aged rapidly. She became delusional, often mistaking complete strangers for me.
"Matthew left because of you."
It seems it even turned into a police matter. Despite it being her first offense and her mental state being taken into consideration, my mother-in-law was widely known as a dangerous individual. Despite this, my father-in-law did not abandon her as he had promised, and is taking care of her. We have cut ties with my husband's relatives and are currently living peacefully. When I look back, it was truly a terrifying experience. I do feel sorry for my father-in-law who knew nothing about it, but I still cannot forgive the fact that my mother-in-law trampled on her own daughter's feelings. For the sake of the older sister who prayed for us to live happily, my husband and I aspire to lead a long life together, taking it slowly and peacefully.